All right, welcome to this video lesson on Dehydrating Mommacetti Part 3. And you hopefully watched Part 1 where we cooked had the uh, cooked Mommacetti put into the dehydrator. And then in Part 2, we actually removed the Mommacetti from the dehydrator and put it into baggies like this. And you can keep this for long time before you're ready to eat it, and you don't have to worry about refrigeration or anything. This has been sitting around the house for a couple days, and I thought, well, time to make a video on how to rehydrate it and then maybe eat it. Okay, so before I kind of get going, I've got my setup in front of me. I'm going to tilt my camera down so you can see what I'm doing, and I'll explain how this is going to work. So what I'm going to start with is doing this in a small scale. This is just a small amount. When we do it in the bush, it's a bigger amount, and then I'll explain that and how it's different. So what I'm going to do is take my kettle here, which is going to act kind of like my little bug stove, and you hopefully watch the video on the little bug stove and how we use it to use fire to create boil water. And that's what we do in the bush most of the time because it's very efficient. We don't have to carry fuel for it. And then I'm going to put a small amount in here. I'm going to put about, I've already boiled this water, so I'm a little ahead of the game, speed up the process a bit. I'm going to put about 300 milliliters in for this. It's better to be a little heavy than a little light, but not too crazy. You don't want to make soup out of this stuff. You want to make it so it's quite tasty. And then I'm going to put it on my stove here and fire my stove up, okay? So in this particular case, I'm doing it in a one-man show. And this is a little pot set and stove that I have for bike packing or solo bike packing or even double two people, but it's not really designed for a big group. This is much like the trail stove that we have. You can hear it running now, and I've got it going. And fairly quickly now, you're going to see that the water inside here starts to boil. You can see the steam coming off the top, and that's an indication that the water is very close to a boiling boil. I'm just going to let it boil up for a bit. And once it does, once I've got it boiling and rolling boil, I'm going to add my Mommacetti to it and see how I did. I think this is about the right amount of water, but, playing games here, trying to check it out and see how much it is. So as it boils, I just simply add my Mommacetti to the boiling water. And it looks like I got it about right. And what I'll do here is I'm going to stir it up just a touch. And I don't want that water to boil off too much because I want it to actually be absorbed. I'm just rotating my pot and stirring. I hold the handle all the time. You'll notice my left hand is on here while I use my right hand to stir, and it looks a lot like a soup. I'm just trying to show you there. I'm not sure how well that is. I'm going to turn the stove off. It looks a lot like kind of a soup in there, and it doesn't really look like much different than it was before. Now, this is just the start of the process. So really, all I'm going to do now is take this, and I'm going to place it right here. I'm going to put a lid on the pot, and I'm going to put a towel over it. And the only reason I do that is to try to reduce the amount of heat that's going to be lost. I want to try to keep the food as warm as possible. So while it's rehydrating, I'm trying to use the heat to help it rehydrate, and I'm going to check on it in a few minutes. So I'm going to bring the camera back up and just talk to you a little bit while it's rehydrating about what we do in the woods. Now, in this particular case, it's a really small batch. I have a pretty good idea how much water I need. You can do the same process in the woods, and you can use the large pot that you use for water on your little bug stove and fill it up with about every batch that we do about a liter of water, maybe a little bit more, and boil that water. So you have to know how much. Use an Nalgene bottle to fill it up and get a fire going and boil it, get it nice rolling boil, and then you can add a package of Mommacetti into it. The downside is that if you want now more water to add, you don't have anything to boil your water because you used your little bug stove. You've got it going, and you're going to take your pot off that fire, and you'd have to use another pot on the little bug stove, which you could do, and boil a small amount. Or what I would recommend is actually boil an extra liter of water, scoop it out into a separate pot, keep it kind of warmed on that fire while you rehydrate. And that way, if you decide later on, oh, I want to add some, I can. The 4-liter pot that you use for boiling water is probably, I know some groups have made it big enough that they can do 2 batches of Mommacetti in it. So it's a lot of food for your group. The downside to that is if you can't eat it all, it's going to go to waste. And I encourage groups to sort of use the more medium-sized pot out of the nesting pots to do up the large pot out of the nesting pots is what I would do. It's not as big as the 4-liter. And what you can do then is you can actually do up one batch, see who's still hungry, and decide how much more you want to cook. And that way, if you have some left over, you have it still in a dehydrated form for another meal later on. Don't get too wasteful, because remember, you're on a trip and there is no other resources available to you, and you might find people are kind of hungry later on, and it's a really good idea to keep that in mind. So whenever I'm in a group, I insist that you do one batch. Everybody gets a good healthy bowl full out of that batch, a bun. They eat, they fill their bellies, and then they say, yeah, I'm really hungry. I need some more. Okay, let's portion off, amounts for each person that's still hungry, and away we go. As opposed to making this massive amount of food, and then everybody's sitting there, oh, I can't eat anymore, I'm stuffed, and what happens is, inevitably, it ends up getting wasted. And it's also a danger at camp, because sometimes what happens is people just leave it lying around, and what does that do? It attracts animals, right, to your camp. And so you have to find ways to get rid of it. It often has to get burned in the fire, okay? It's not even really safe to leave it overnight unless you're going to put it in a pail and seal it up. And then in the morning, sometimes I'll have a kid that will go, oh yeah, I'll still eat that. That is good stuff, and then they'll go and grab a spoon and eat it cold, or they'll eat it by warming it up a little bit over the fire or over a stove, and that's fine. I mean, eating food any way you can in the bush is what you'll do. You'll find that you're very different in your approach to it, okay? Now, the secret is, you have to give it time. Remember, it took 24 hours to get all the moisture out of the Mommacetti in a dehydrator. It doesn't go back in instantaneously. It actually takes time. Even the prepackaged sealed food bags that we buy take 10 or 15 minutes to rehydrate. And I'm going to say the same thing applies to this, okay? So we've been sitting here now for a few minutes. I don't know, I didn't put an exact timer on it, but I'm going to say 2 or 3 minutes. There's no way at this point this Mommacetti in the container that we just did is going to be quite ready. Now, it might be ready to have a quick look and see how it's doing, give it a stir, and if there's not a lot of free water in there anymore, I might consider adding some more to it. Now, I'll check on it right now. You saw it was looking pretty soupy before, and so let's see how it looks now. And if I give it a stir, it's starting to thicken up, and it's starting to look much more like a stew with a bit of water on the top. Now, I'm going to bring the camera back down so you can kind of get a good look. You can see there is some moisture still, but there's still lots of clumps of food, and they're slowly rehydrating. So giving it a stir. I would not add any water to this because there's still free water on the surface, which means that I probably got about the right amount in there, okay? And I'm going to put the lid back on, and I'm going to throw a towel back on. And all the towel's doing is just offering some insulation so things don't get so cold, right? So the better you wrap it up, the better. I put something under a tea towel, maybe underneath it as well. And that is simply the process there. Now, how well you do or how long you take to do it will be up to you as a group. Some people will be willing to eat it already at this stage. They'll go, oh, it's good and I'm starving, and they'll just go at it and they'll eat it. It'll be a bit more soupy. It'll have some more crunchy items in it. It'll be better than it was when it was completely dry, which makes you can't eat it at that point. You can eat it that way. I mean, if I was in the wilderness and I was starving and I had no options available to me, I would definitely eat it that way. I just drink some water while I do it because it's going to need some water to help me digest it and stuff, but it's not going to kill you. It's perfectly acceptable to eat the dehydrated food just as that. It's not going to kill you to do that. Okay, and so I'm just going to sit here and let this go for a little bit. So just remember, in the woods, you got different options, but generally speaking, I add the boiling water to the pot of Mommacetti. and I bring it just above the level of the Mommacetti. So you'll pour the Mommacetti into the pot and it'll sit in there at a certain height. And when you add the water, I want to see that Mommacetti just start to float at the top. And that tells me I've got about the right amount of water if you want to do it that way. The other option is boil about 1 liter per batch, and maybe a little bit more than 1 liter. I'd even add 100 mils extra. So if you're using your Nalgene, put 500 in, then 600 in. Nice and easy to measure out. Boil the water. Then once it's boiling, I add my Mommacetti. Now I emphasize, I am not cooking it right now at this point. I am letting it just sit and rehydrate, okay? If you cook it, I guarantee you, like every time kids have tried to cook it while they're rehydrating, it's turned into a nightmare. It sticks to the bottom. It gets burnt. And sometimes it gets so badly burnt that it just brings a whole burnt flavor to the whole pot of food. And it doesn't go over very well. So trust me on this one. Just be patient. Let it take its time to rehydrate, okay? I'm going to check it one more time, maybe have a little bite here and see how it's going, because maybe it's not quite ready yet, but it's getting there, and I think you can even have a little bite from it. And yeah, it still looks a lot like it just did a few minutes ago. It looks pretty meaty and a little bit of noodles in there, and yeah, it's definitely still chewy. It needs some more time. Could I eat it like this? I think so. I can handle that no problem. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover it up and I'm going to let it rehydrate for 10 more minutes. And then I'm going to enjoy myself a really good dinner because it's actually pretty tasty. All right. Hope you enjoyed that. That's rehydrating your dehydrated food. By the way, one of the most affordable ways to camp is to dehydrate some of the foods you have at home. Chili works good. Anything that is one pot dish can be rehydrated. I've even seen people take lasagna, but in the end, you just cut it up into little pieces and then rehydrate it. And then when you are dehydrated, and when you rehydrate it, it's just all mushed in there, but it's got the same sort of flavors as what you'd have for lasagna at home. All right, I hope you enjoyed the video and enjoy answering your questions, and fire me any questions if you have them. Have a good one.